So yeah, I've been a big fan of Marcel, so coming to London and meeting him so far has been one of the highlights of this trip. Anyway, so we're going to build an app for React Advanced London today. And it's not just going to be any app, it's going to be a pretty good looking and nice app. And it's only going to take us a couple of minutes, so I'll spend the first 30 minutes wasting your time talking about other stuff. I have about 70 slides to cover, which means we're going to have less than 30 seconds per slide, and I'm already wasting a little bit of time. But since this is an advanced conference, I think that we can handle that. So we're starting off here at this picture. This is RNA 2019. RNA 2019 is the React Native Amazon conference. Amazon uses React Native extensively. You may not know it, but a lot of our apps are either built fully with React Native, partially with React Native. We have a lot of greenfield projects being built right now in React Native, including, I think, the most recent app is the Alexa app. Anyway, we have an internal React Native conference even because we have that many people in the community. People come from all over the world that work in Europe and India to Seattle to this conference. And we had around 350 attendees last year. This year, we're actually going to be expanding this to React and React Native. So I think we're going to be expecting in the range of around 500 or 600 attendees. Anyway, we had a couple of people from Facebook last year come and speak at the conference. We had Peter, we had Valentine, and we even had Gant Laborde from actually, not Chain React, that's their conference, but from Infinite Red came. And this is the app that we had. This is RNA 2019. We built this app specifically for our little internal conference of 300 or so people, but we like to do things the right way. So we built an app completely from scratch, complete with authentication and styling and all this stuff. It was pretty nice, actually. And my talk there was actually about kind of teaching people that were coming to this talk or to this conference that may have been from other AWS services, outside of where I work, which I'll go over in just a moment, about how to build this conference app and build it in a quick manner and build it in the same way that actually the app that they were holding in their hands was built. So how can we rebuild this app? And one of the most interesting things about this app, and one of the things that everyone really liked about this app, is that we had a little area for discussions. And in this discussions tab, for each talk, people could have their own, questions and answer sessions about what the user was talking about or what the speaker was talking about. One of the interesting things also that happened here was after the talk, the speaker went in and started answering questions and having discussions with all of the people that were in the conference, and it led to a lot of really great conversations and a lot of good connections. A lot of introverts at Amazon, including myself, believe it or not. And we don't sometimes like to go out there and put ourselves out there, so having this area to have a conversation was pretty cool. Everyone really liked it a lot. And the specs for this app were pretty basic. We needed a way for users to manage themselves, so user management. We had an area for you to update your profile. We had a way for you to query the talks and have those talks listed in the app. And we had that area where you could create and query for comments about a talk. And we had the real-time aspect, which was the GraphQL subscriptions, which meant that if someone created a comment, it would come through in real time right away. You wouldn't have to poll or anything like that. So this is kind of what the requirements look like, sketched out as far as like the requirements that you might actually implement yourself. User management, database, and API, I used GraphQL. The implementation I used because I work at AWS was Amplify with AppSync. You could actually do everything that I'm about to talk about not using AWS, and I wouldn't even recommend using AWS actually if you're not familiar with AWS already and you're already familiar with something else. So for instance, you could use a managed authentication service like Auth0 with Apollo. If you wanted to have something similar to AppSync, you could use Sasura or even Prisma, and also I think there's 8base, and there's a few other things out there that are really good. So what we first did was kind of talk about the data modeling. So we had this GraphQL schema where we have a talk type and we have a comment type. And the talk type had the information about the speaker already kind of added there, so we didn't need a separate type for the speaker. That's going to change, though, in the next version of what I'm about to show you. And we had the comment type, and we had an association that we created. So the comments were an array of comments on the talk type. So to build this, I used Amplify. Amplify, if you haven't heard of it already, a command line interface to create AWS services, a client library for interacting with those services, We support React, React Native, and native iOS and native Android, and all of the web frameworks, and a couple of other things. To create the app, I first built out the React Native app on the front end with dummy data, just kind of built out something pretty basic, and then I added the back end. Using the command line interface, you just run init, then you add the different features you want, add auth, add API, push, deploys the services to the cloud, and you're kind of ready to go. This is what the dependencies look like for the end app. It wasn't a lot of dependencies. We had date functions, we had snap carousel and React navigation. Everything else was pretty much just React Native and Amplify specific. So at the end of this talk, Gant Laborde came to me from Infinite Red. They run Chain React. So Chain React is the big React Native conference back in the United States. And he said, what would it take for us to take that discussion panel and bring it into the React Native app that we have for Chain React? And that's really what this talk is about. It's about a couple of other things that I'll also go over. So welcome to hooking up a conference in real time with React Native and GraphQL. That was my long intro. My name is Nader Dabit. I'm a software developer and I'm an author. I've written React Native in Action for many publications, and I'm now writing Full Stack Serverless, which is basically building full stack apps using cloud resources in React and GraphQL. And you can find me on Twitter, Medium, and dev.to, and GitHub at Dabit3. So, I'm a futurist, and this kind of maybe doesn't even go along with what I'm about to talk about, and you may not even care. But I think it's pretty cool that being a futurist actually, I think, helps people in their career as a software developer, because you're able to understand things that are happening and be in the right place at the right time. So you're riding those waves as they come. And being a futurist isn't about predicting the future, it's more about being aware of the present and kind of understanding what's actually going on in front of you, listening to people, understanding everything that is actually going on. So this talk has three main points. The future of full stack development, in my opinion, how this looks in a React Native world and in action, and then the live demo of us building an app in this way. And then this idea of full stack serverless, which is also happens to be the name of my book, but it's also kind of an idea that I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of in the future. So the challenge that I had after talking to Gant was take the existing Chain React app, download it from GitHub, add a new GraphQL backend that has real-time comments, submit a pull request, and have this done in time for the new conference that we were going to have out in Portland. So the first step for me was to model the data. For me, that meant taking that speaker type out and separating it, because a few of the talks actually had multiple speakers, and for us to have that data hard-coded into the talk didn't make sense anymore. So instead, we had a talk that had multiple speakers and multiple comments. That way we have these three types now. So we now have a talk type, a comment type, and a speaker type. So after we model the data, we need to then create the database and the resolvers that map to the schema that we just created. And for me, since I'm using AppSync, I can use this GraphQL transform library. If you're using Hasura, there's something similar to this that allows you to create all of these backend resources using some pretty base types. But for AppSync, we have this @model directive that allows you to take a base type and add all of the different CRUD operations schema to it. It also adds a database, and it adds the resolvers that map between the schema and the database. So you end up with create, read, update, delete, and list for every type that you have in your in your schema. We also have the auth directive, which allows you to configure authorization rules. And this is kind of important because we wanted to have an admin panel that allowed only people that were admins and that had this admin access to be able to create a new talk. But anyone could read a talk, so we needed that level of authorization. And we also wanted to make sure that people that created a comment had the option to delete their own comment. And we needed an admin panel that we're going to go over in just a moment to be able to delete comments as well. And then we needed a way to have relationships. So how do you create a one-to-many relationship, a many-to-many relationship, or even a one-to-one relationship between GraphQL? And that's kind of a really difficult thing to solve at first when you're first getting into GraphQL, how to understand that. there's a directive called @connection that just allows you to decorate the different types, and we actually create the underlying resolver code for you. You can then take that and modify it to add your own business rules that you'd like. So this is the final schema that we ended up with. This is what's on GitHub. It's actually open source. So we have all of that base type that I talked about, but we just add that @model directive to each type to give us the 3 databases. And then we have the @connection fields to model a relationship between a talk and a speaker, and also an @connection to model a comment with the talk. So that's that's the schema that we ended up with. So for me to actually take this schema and implement it into that Chain React app, I actually worked along with someone at Infinite Red a lot that helped me out with this. We ended up just basically going back and forth over some stuff. I ended up submitting pull requests. She merged all of the changes that I made in, and ended up with basically a teamwork on this effort. So the first thing I did, though, starting off, was just go to the Chain React app and download it, right? So I downloaded the app. I looked at the existing data sources that they had and kind of knew what I needed to rip out and replace. So I have this downloaded app. First of all, I initialize a new Amplify project, Amplify init. I add the API, and then I run Amplify push, because at this moment, we're not worried about any authorization rules. We're just worried about the API. So after we've created this backend, we need to start querying and creating mutations, because we need to query for the talks, and we need to create a mutation for the comments. So this is what the API looks like with Amplify. You could use also Apollo or whatever, Urkel, actually, any of those are really great. And you can just, for our client though, it's a promise based, so you await the data similar to something like fetch or something like Axios. And then for mutations, it looks like this. It's very similar to that query, except you have a second argument to the GraphQL operation, which is the variables that you need to pass in. And in this instance, it would be the talk ID. So, for the next step, we have to think about identity, right? Because do we want anyone to be able to just download this app and use it without us knowing anything about the user? And at this point, you have to start thinking about a lot of other stuff. So instead of creating authentication, because we thought that might be a little bit too much friction, because if someone downloads an app, they've already gone through the process of going to the App Store, downloading it, opening it, and then they see a sign-up screen. It's just a lot of friction sometimes. So what we decided to do is instead we created a way to assign an identity to every user, and we did that by just creating 2 main arrays, an array of animals and an array of colors, and then concatenating the animal name, the color name, and then a number. So we just kind of assigned every user this base identity, and then when they open the app, they can then change this, and when they create a new comment, then that's who they are referenced as, because if I create a profile and I put my name as Nader, when I create a talk, and now it says Nader. Now, there are a couple of problems with this that you're thinking probably, but for me, I was like, we're done. I actually submitted a pull request like we're done. And then Jamin came back to me, and he said, what about bad actors? What about the people that come to your conference that might be, doing bad things and not acting by the code of conduct? You just never know the type of people that might be showing up to your conference. So you have to protect against all of these people, right? So we needed a way to have some type of identity, some type of secure identity, and then we needed a way to manage those bad actors. So we could have gone back and added authentication, but we decided to try something else. And what we did was worked with React Native device info. And this basically gives a UUID for every device. And this way, when someone downloads the app and opens it, we assign that user under the hood a unique ID. So we're not going by their username anymore. The UI is showing their username, but us in the database, we're actually going to start storing this unique ID. So what we needed to do was update our schema, because we needed to now add this device ID. So whenever someone creates a new comment now, we now have their ID. So we can now say, oh, this person, was rude. We need to be able to do something now with this information. So, that was me thinking we were done, but we're not. Because what about moderation? Because just because we know that someone said something bad, how are we going to stop them from doing anything again, right? Or how do we even know who that person is? So we decided to create a way to report people, first of all. And in the app, you can now press a button on a comment and report this comment. And we have now that comment in a separate database. And we can see, oh, this person said this thing. And we have a dashboard that I created now to kind of list all of these bad things. And we had now the option also, we added some logic in the app that where we can block a device. So if this device said something bad, we can just block them from being able to comment anymore. And I think there is a way around this. I think they could maybe uninstall or clear their entire phone, completely just wipe it out, and then start it over, and it would give a unique ID again. But hey, if they want to go through that much problem, that's their problem, I guess. So yeah, this was kind of what we ended up with. We ended up with this dashboard where if someone created a report that we thought was unnecessary, we could just dismiss it or delete it. And then we could also block a device if we thought they were being rude. So the real-time aspect of this, well, GraphQL subscriptions, of course. So automatically, when we use that @model directive, it not only creates the resolvers and the other schema for you, it actually creates the subscription definitions, and it implements the actual subscriptions for you on the back end. And you're given these two subscriptions based on you're given 3 subscriptions actually based on every type. You're given on create, on update, and on delete. The only 2 that actually we use in the app were on create comment and on create report. On create report was so our dashboard was real time. On create comment was so our app was real time. And to actually then hook into the subscription on the client, if you're using Apollo, you would do something, and there's a couple of ways to do it now. I think there's a hook even. But with the AppSync and Amplify, it looks something like this. We have this API.GraphQL, and then we can just call .subscribe. And once you pass in the thing that you want to subscribe to, you have this next function that will fire every time a new mutation is made that matches the mutation that you're subscribed to. So you would get that data in that next function, and you do whatever you want to do with it. What we basically did was take the existing comments, check to make sure that the person that created the comment isn't the one receiving the comment. If they are, we discard. If they're not, we then update the state and re-render and give the new list of comments. So now, at the end of this, what we ended up with, we built this app, we shipped it, I did a talk on it at Chain React, and we open sourced the code, or it was already open source. We just continued that progression. We just continued to open source our code. But what we ended up with was infrastructure as code. Because Amplify, when you're building an app, it actually creates this infrastructure as code for you. And I want to talk about that for a moment and why I think that's important. So what is infrastructure as code? As front-end developers, or as me as a front-end developer, I didn't know anything about this about 2 years ago. But it's the process of managing and provisioning computer data centers through machine-readable definition files rather than physical hardware configuration or interactive configuration tools. Now that's a really unnecessary description that I'm not really a big fan of, but it is what I got from I think it was the first thing I found on Google actually, but whatever. But it's a pretty base. If you look at this definition, you'll see this over and over, something similar to this. But in reality, what it basically is a file with descriptions of what you want provisioned, and then you take this file and you can reuse it and deploy this thing over and over and over and over, right? And if you think about how we as front-end developers are using things like Create React App, we're doing something similar, right? We're taking an existing app and we're creating it over and over and over and over. So someone created this base project that we're able to use, and how much productivity have we gotten out of Create React App, or how much productivity do we get out of these CLI tools like React Native CLI and things? Well, these things are actually happening on the back end now as well. So with infrastructure as code, if you know what you're doing, you can actually write this and deploy the back end. But what I'm really interested in is the combination of the back end and the front end, right? What if you are able to create the back end infrastructure as code, create the front end that you would like, and then you put these two things together what you end up with is a app that we might have normally spent months or years, right, building, depending on the type of app that you've built, and we're able to deploy this in seconds or minutes. So what we were left with this app that we built for Chain React looks something like this. The CLI that Amplify actually creates the infrastructure as code for you under the hood. So what you're left with is this folder that you can then just take. You can clone this folder and redeploy this conference app back in and plug it into any front end that you'd like. And you don't have to know anything about cloud computing at all. You just have to understand how to work with the CLI, which most of us do. Anyway, after this conference, I got really inspired, and I wrote this article called Infrastructure as Code in the Era of GraphQL and Full Stack Serverless. And it kind of is, this progression where I'm kind of going in the future of my career, I think. I think we're seeing a new paradigm that's kind of opening up here. And I'm kind of trying to capitalize on this and try to be able to push this idea forward. So the next thing I decided to do was take the app backend that we had and build a new front end for it and make it completely redeployable in a couple of minutes. Because if you take the Chain React app, it was a great app, but a lot of that stuff was very specific to the app that was for Chain React. It wasn't something that I could use and just redeploy. So what I decided to do was create something very similar, but have it agnostic to the conference. Instead, you can go in and create all this configuration and deploy this for your own event using this full stack serverless with the front end and the back end in a couple of minutes. So this is what the app looks like, conference app in a box. To deploy this yourself, you just clone it. You run Amplify init and Amplify push, which deploys the back end. React Native run iOS or React Native run Android deploys the front end. So far, I've worked with over 30 conferences implementing it. I worked with someone this morning that pushed this over the top of $50,000 from consulting contracts that people use from it. The girl that I worked with this morning, or the lady I worked with this morning, she spent 8 hours building this app, and she charged her client 14,500 euros. Yeah, and it looks so good. It looks really good. Because I'm going to show you how we're going to do this in 3 minutes. She spent 8 hours, so, it's amazing. No, but it's cool. But the idea here is full stack serverless is what I'm calling it, but it's really just full stack whatever. Full stack cloud, full stack anything. But I think you're going to see, a lot of other places, a lot of other companies moving in this direction. So Google, Microsoft, I think you're going to start seeing people doing things with Netlify and Hasura and all these things, maybe making it more configurable to be able to plug all this stuff in more easily. Full stack serverless, this is my definition. A single programming language or skill set allows you to build full stack. So you don't need to learn Ruby and Python and Go and JavaScript. You need to learn one programming language and have one skill set. You heavily intentionally use managed services. This means that if something has already been created, you don't go and reinvent the wheel. You use that thing, and you try to work your way around those constraints if possible. If not, you can then use serverless functions to fill in the gaps for those things that are missing. The front-end skill set is becoming increasingly valuable. I'm seeing that within my company. I'm seeing that all over the place, all over the world. People are getting paid more and more and more for having this front-end skill set. I think that's going to continue to happen. The idea for full stack is now APIs in front end. It's not building the back end. It's more connecting to APIs and understanding how front end works. Reproducible back end and front ends, which is kind of what I talked about just a moment ago. And you end up with like magnitudes of increased developer velocity and experimentation. This brings me to something I'm going to launch soon. But before I do that, let's demo the conference app in a box. Whoops, sorry about that. I have all my stuff open. Okay, so what we want to do is create a React Advanced app using the React conference app in a box, React Native. This is what you get when you run git clone and amplify init React Native run. This is exactly what you have here. This is a blank app. There's nothing there. All you have is this profile, and you can go in and change the location on the map. So what I want to do is I want to build an app that looks like this, okay? So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and populate the data. And to do that, we can go to the command line where we finished creating the app, and I can run a command. And the command is amplify console API. And this will open up the GraphQL API in our dashboard here. All right? And what we can do then is I have a query already defined here. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and copy all this and bring it over here. This way I don't have to type all this out. I want to go ahead and create three talks, okay? So the first talk I'm going to create is going to be from earlier. So we'll go ahead and create this talk. And I need to go ahead and log in. So I think I need to go ahead and do that real quick, which I have that information here. All right, sorry about that. So we've logged in. So I'll go ahead and create my first talk, which isn't there yet, because I need to go and copy it again. All right, we create our first talk. I'm going to go and create our second talk, which is going to be from Emma. And I'll get our third talk, and then we'll be ready to go. This one's from Kitsy. Oh, it looks like I need to go and do this a little better. All right, so I created 3 talks. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh. And we should now see our 3 talks here, okay? So we have our talks, but it still doesn't look like this, right? It still looks kind of ugly. So let's go ahead and theme this real quick. So what I want to do is I want to change the primary colors. So I'll go ahead and copy these 3 colors. I want to go ahead and change the highlight color to be that cool green color. Go ahead and put that here. And I'm going to change the logo to now be the React Advanced logo. All right, so now we should be able to refresh. And now we have a pretty nice looking app, huh? So what about discussions? So we talked about that real-time aspect. So let's go ahead and troll Kitsy. So I want to go ahead and create a comments. So what I'm going to do is, let's go ahead and query for all the talks so we can get the ID for the talk. So I want to get the ID for the talk that Kitsy did, which is navigating the hype-driven front-end development world. So we have that ID. So now what we can do is we can create a mutation using the talk ID from Kitsy. And say something rude. No, I'm just checking. Okay, say something nice. Let's just say something nice, right? Looks like I have an error. Looks like I have create comment created somewhere else here. So we're going to delete that. All right, so let's see. So when we create this comment, you should see it come through in real time, right? So let's go ahead and see if that works. And that does not work. Oh, I think I know why. I need to go ahead and return all of these things. So let's go ahead and try that one more time. No, that's not working. Let's try one last time. I think it might have something to do. No. I don't have a good reason why this isn't working. The last thing I might do is just try to refresh. I have a feeling it's something I'm not returning from the mutation, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Okay, cool. So that's the demo. The next thing I want to talk about, so what if we take this a step further? So building a conference app, that's cool, but not everyone wants that, right? But CMS and WordPress, like that powers what, 75% of the internet, I guess, or 80%, that's what they say, 50%, whatever. It's a huge portion. And the reason that people like WordPress is that it's a full stack solution. It's the database, it's the front end, it's the back end code, it's the authentication, it's the authorization. It has plugins, it has everything that you need, but it's built on older technology, but still it works great. But what if we want something like this that is modern, and we want this to be working with things like server-side rendering, and we want it to be very fast, and maybe we want to use React and all of these other things. So that's what I'm building right now. It's called Jamstack CMS. I'll be releasing this, I believe, next week in Prague at the React IvConf. That's my plan. We'll see. Anyway, so what is it? It's a full-stack end-to-end blog, site builder, and CMS. It's built version 1 with Gatsby on the front end, Amplify on the back end, deploy to Netlify, Amplify, or any other hosting service with some built-in webhooks that are kind of configured with the CMS. Version 2, though, I want to be able to be configured with any cloud provider. But I think right now, the only thing that I understand how to do is actually use the tools that I understand, which is AWS. So that's kind of why I'm going this route. I'm pretty sure this can be done with Google and Firebase. Not entirely sure, but I think using things like Terraform or something on the back end can be done. Hopefully someone will submit a pull request. Anyway, there's 3 main types of pages that you can create: a blog post, a dynamic web page, and a custom web page. The custom web page means you can actually go in and write whatever code that you're used to writing, which means that this might be a good solution for consultants that want to get up and running quickly, that just need a blog with a few basic, web pages that the client can then go in and configure through a WYSIWYG editor, which that's exactly what it has, WYSIWYG editor. You can initialize and deploy the entire CMS with 2 commands from the command line. So you download it and you run those 2 commands and you're ready to go. It's customizable and pluggable already to an extent. It's themable coming out of the box with 6 themes all out of the bat, but the themes are so easy to make. I'm assuming a lot of people will be coming in with a lot of themes. It has secure media hosting, image hosting built in and management, which means that you can create, update, upload images and use those in your app, just like with WordPress. And there's permissions built in for authentication and fine-grained access control, which is really important for enabling admin access and things like that. This is kind of a preview of what it looks like. This is just a preview of kind of a really basic page that might be built with it. This is just showing a couple of blog posts and kind of one of the default themes that comes out of the box. There's also the dark mode. This is kind of what that might look like. And this is kind of what it might look like if you're creating a new post. The new page view is something I'm not kind of showing off right now. Anyway, if you want to keep up with it, you can follow me on Twitter, Jamstack CMS, and keep up with the updates there. All right, so these are the links to everything. I'm actually going to tweet out the links to my slides on Twitter, Dabit3. Follow me if you're interested in that. You don't have to remember these links or anything like that. And that's it. Thank you.